Another broken samurai build has entered the lands between, and if you want to destroy your targets with devastating sword sorcery damage in 1 or 2 casts, or punish your enemies with immense stance damage, the Ether Samurai build is for you. I'm the Samurai and I'll be guiding you on how to maximize this build and state the possible challenges that this build has, so ultimately this guide will help you decide if you want to go forward for this build. The Ether Samurai entered the lands between and learned the ways of the land by combining Eastern sword mastery with Carian sorcery and develop a unique fighting style. This individual can materialize swords out of the ether and overwhelm its enemies with immense magic damage. Being able to deal with devastating raw and stance damage in one fell swoop is the specialty of this build, so bosses and enemies will be dropping fast if they encounter this monstrous build. Moving on to the build stats, and I allocated 50 points to Vigor to give the user fair survivability in combat. You are welcome to adjust it to 60 points if you think you really need more health while adjusting to the build's gameplay. We will be using a lot of sorcery in this build, so 30 points have been allocated to mine, while 25 points were added to endurance, and I find it just right for this playstyle. Intelligence, dexterity, and strength will be our main offensive stats for this build, allocating 80 to intelligence, 40 to dexterity, and 19 to strength, while 25 points were added to fate so we can cast our key buffs later on. Lastly, no points were added to arcane. If you are playing at level 150, I got you covered as I am showing them on the screen right now. For the build's main weapon, the Great Katana will take the spot. This weapon requires 14 strength and 18 dexterity for a user to wield the weapon properly, while having D scaling for strength, C for dexterity, and C for intelligence if the user sets it on cold affinity. Now for the Great Katana's Ashes of War, we will be using the Carian's Sovereignty. This is going to be our main damage source in this build, and it is undoubtedly one of the strongest sorcery in the game. Pressing and holding L2 once will let the user summon and charge a giant magic greatsword, which will then be dropped on targets, dealing a huge tons of damage. Pressing L2 again will let the user swing the magic greatsword horizontally, making a strong circular AoE, perfect for multiple targets. Whether you are dealing with a single target or a large group of enemies, this sorcery can be an effective tool thanks to its insane damage multipliers and range. On top of its insane raw damage, targets will also be suffering immense stance damage, leading to frequent stance breaks. Keep in mind that the Carian Sovereignty will deal more damage with magic affinity, but I chose cold affinity instead to maximize frost status effects in this build. Also, if you want to min-max, equipping great swords, curved great swords, and heavy thrusting swords instead will give you the best points when casting Carian Sovereignty. But this is a samurai build, so equipping the Great Katana is mandatory in my case. I mention this because you want to pay attention to the bonus points that the mentioned weapon types provides, as you do have an option to tank attacks while casting this spell. Moving on to the build's secondary weapons, I am using the finger seal to be able to cast our key buffs later on. And for us to cast our key sorceries, we will be equipping the Carian Regal Scepter for its magnificent sorcery scaling. Following it up with suggested spells, and the first one on the list is of course our Flame Grant Me Strength incantation, for an additional 20% physical attack boost and stamina recovery buff. The second buff on the list is of course Golden Vow. This buff increases overall damage by 15% and adds 10% damage negation, which is very helpful for this build. Terra Magica is also a good buff for this build, since you can increase your insane magic damage by 22.5% when standing on the sigil. There will be certain scenarios where you can supercharge your Carian Sovereignty with Terra Magica, and most of the time 1 or 2 shots targets. I decided to slot in a couple of sorceries that not only match the build's theme, but also provides versatility and more utility to the build. We will be capitalizing on stance damage in this build, so slotting in Great Blade Phalanx will be ideal. Not only this sorcery will deal great stance damage to targets, but it can also help you make targets flinch and increase the chances of landing Carian Sovereignty. Casting Great Blade Phalanx before you approach the boss is what I usually do. Or you can use it periodically to slowly break the enemy stance, and when the target is staggered, you can end them with Carian Sovereignty. For more AoE attack options, I've decided to slot in a Duelist Moonblade since it will help you ramp up the cult status effects on targets while also giving you great AoE attack options when dealing with groups of enemies rather than relying on Carian sovereignty alone. Note that when the enemy suffers cold status, it will lower its damage negation by 20%, making your sorcery hits way harder, especially the already absurd damage of the Carian sovereignty. Another suggested sorcery is Glint Braid Trio, and you will be using this as your main range attack, especially when a boss is in the middle of an AoE attack alongside with Great Blade Phalanx. And as always, if you find this guide useful, subscribing to the channel and liking the video sure helps me a lot, and thank you for your support. Moving on to my suggested Talismans next, and the first one on the list is of course our Shard of Alexander, for the additional 15% skill damage increase it provides. Next on the list is our Magic Scorpion Charm, for the additional 12% magic damage it provides. Majority of our damage sources in this build is magic damage, so slotting in Magic Scorpion Charm is suggested. Next is Graven Mask Talisman for another 8% sorcery damage increase. This talisman can easily be replaced by Dragon Crest Great Shield if you are still adjusting to the build's gameplay, and you will likely take hits when casting Carian Sovereignty. For the last talisman slot, Carian Sovereignty is a chargeable spell, so slotting in Godfrey's icon will further increase its damage. Moving on to my Flask of Wondrous Physique combination, I suggest slotting in Bloodsucking Crack Tier since enemies die quickly anyway, so the HP loss in this configuration is not that an issue, and you can easily ignore this downside if you already know how to play this build effectively. However, if you find the Bloodsucking Tier HP loss per second too much, you can equip the Stormbarb Crack Tier for more stance damage. For the next slot, I suggest slotting in Magic Shredding Crack Tier for another 20% magic damage increase. For the Great Runes, I always suggest Godric's Great Rune for the additional 5 stats across the board. Moving on to the Aether Samurai's armor set, I'm going for this Samurai Knight Sorcerer theme, so I equip Iron Casa for the headpiece, Relana's armor, Fire Prelate's gauntlets for the arm piece, and lastly, Relana's greaves for the leg piece. It's time for the build's pros and cons, and starting with pros first. The first one on the list is of course the insane damage output of this build. As mentioned, Carian Sovereignty is a hell of a strong spell, giving the user the ability to 1 or 2 shot bosses. Of course, it has its downside as well, and more into this later on. On the other hand, not just Carian Sovereignty, all of your sorceries in this setup will deal great damage. And of course, the second major positive in this build is of course the build's great stance damage. By using the Great Blade Phalanx and Carian Sovereignty combo, you will be breaking enemy stances quickly. When enemies are stance broken, you can pull off another Carian Sovereignty to quickly end them. So it's not advisable to do a critical strike in this build. And of course, the frost status that you can easily inflict with your Great Katana and a Duelist Moonblade is another huge positive, making your damage even stronger. The last positive that I can think of is the build's overall versatility. This build can perform optimally in any situation because of its repertoire. Even if you can't use Carian Sovereignty in certain scenarios, for example, when dealing with fast-moving targets, you will still have your Great Katana and other sorceries to take the said types effectively. Moving on to cons, and Carian Sovereignty is no doubt a very strong spell, but its glaring downside is hard to adjust to. Its super long animation can be a pain for many users out there, and when not used properly, enemies can cancel this, Ashes of War, and can even the cause of your deaths most of the time. It may take time to understand when and where you will use this skill, especially when dealing with fast moving targets, but when you master its demanding timing, surely you will have a good time. Well, the next one is pulling off consecutive Carian Sovereignty will drain your whole stamina quickly, so keep this in mind. All in all, the Aether Samurai is simply one of the best intelligence builds currently. Being able to deal massive damage in 1 to 2 shots is always a fun way to destroy enemies. If you can handle the Carian Sovereignty's demanding timing, you will have a lot of fun playing this build. On the other hand, it requires focus and careful timing to be used correctly, so it can provide a balanced experience for many. The Aether Samurai is definitely an S tier build, but if you want to play as the Bloodgore Ronin who can deal massive raw and bleed damage on targets, or be the best Moonveil user out there, these build videos are for you. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video as it helps me a lot. Subscribe as more builds coming soon, and I will catch you on the next one.